Welcome to Forgotten Myths. Get comfortable. Let your body relax. Let the world outside fade away. Tonight, we're talking about family. Specifically, we're talking about one family, the most dysfunctional family in all of mythology, the Children of Zeus. Zeus was the king of the gods, the ruler of Olympus, the most powerful being in the universe. He was also, by any reasonable standard, a terrible father. He had dozens of children, maybe hundreds. He lost count. Gods and demigods and heroes and monsters scattered across the world like seeds thrown carelessly by a farmer who didn't care where they landed. Some of his children he acknowledged, some he ignored, some he actively tried to destroy. And the ones he loved? They often suffered the most. Because being a child of Zeus meant being caught in the crossfire of divine politics. It meant having a target on your back from the moment you were born. It meant that Hera, Zeus's wife, the queen of the gods, would hunt you across the world for the crime of existing. Tonight, we're telling 5 stories. Dionysus, the god who was born twice, who was ripped from his mother's burning body and sewn into his father's thigh, who brought wine and madness to the world and paid a terrible price for both. Athena, the goddess who had no mother, who sprang fully formed from Zeus's skull after he swallowed her pregnant mother whole. The only child Zeus truly trusted. Apollo and Artemis, the divine twins, the god of light and the goddess of the hunt, beautiful and deadly, born on a tiny island because no land would shelter their mother from Hera's wrath. Heracles, the greatest hero who ever lived, the strongest man in the world, driven mad by Hera, forced to murder his own family, condemned to 12 impossible labors as penance. And Perseus, the slayer of Medusa, the hero who was supposed to die before he was born, who survived because his mother was brave, and because sometimes even Zeus protects his children. These are the children of Zeus. Their stories are not happy ones. But then, when your father is the king of the gods and your stepmother wants you dead, happy endings are hard to come by. There was a princess named Semele. She was the daughter of Cadmus, the founder of Thebes. She was beautiful, not just mortal beautiful, but beautiful enough to catch the attention of the gods. Beautiful enough to catch the attention of Zeus. The king of the gods saw her walking in her father's gardens one evening. The moonlight caught her hair. Her laughter drifted up to Olympus. Zeus was smitten. He came to her that night, not in disguise, not as a bull or a swan or a shower of gold, the way he often approached mortal women. He came as himself, or at least as much of himself as a mortal could perceive. He told her he was a god. She believed him. They fell in love, or at least Semele fell in love. Zeus felt whatever Zeus felt. Desire, certainly. Possessiveness, probably. Something that looked like love if you didn't examine it too closely. They began an affair. Night after night, Zeus descended from Olympus to be with his mortal lover. Night after night, Semele welcomed him into her bed. And soon she was pregnant. Hera found out. She always found out. She was the goddess of marriage after all. Infidelity was her domain in a twisted way. She could sense it like a shark senses blood in the water. She was furious. Not at Zeus. She was always furious at Zeus. But she had learned long ago that she couldn't punish him directly. He was too powerful, and in his own careless way, he did love her. No, Hera's fury was directed at the mortal woman, at Semele, at this princess who had dared to sleep with her husband, who was now carrying her husband's child. Hera decided to destroy her. She disguised herself as an old woman, a nursemaid named Beroe, who had cared for Semele since childhood. She came to the princess and sat beside her and talked the way old women talk to young mothers. "Your lover," Hera said in Beroe's voice. "He says he's a god?" "He is," Semele said. "He's Zeus himself." "Are you sure?" Semele frowned. "What do you mean?" "Well," Hera let doubt creep into her voice. "Many men claim to be gods when they want to seduce a woman. How do you know he's telling the truth? Have you ever seen his true form?" "His true form?" "The form he shows the other gods, the form of the king of Olympus. If he really loved you, wouldn't he show you that? Wouldn't he prove who he really is?" The seed was planted. Semele tried to ignore it, but the doubt grew. Night after night, as Zeus came to her in his dimmed mortal-friendly form, she wondered, was he really who he said he was? Or was she being deceived? Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "I want to see you," she said one night, "the real you, your true divine form." Zeus went pale. "Semele, you don't know what you're asking." "I want to see the form you show the other gods. I want to see you as you really are." "It would kill you." "Then you're not really a god?" Semele's voice was cold. The doubt Hera had planted had done its work. A real god wouldn't be afraid to show himself to the woman he loves. Zeus tried to argue. He tried to explain. He told her that his true form was fire and lightning, that no mortal could survive seeing it, that he was protecting her by appearing in diminished form. Semele didn't believe him. She had made him swear an oath on the river Styx, the most binding oath a god could make, that he would grant her one wish, whatever she asked. Now she was calling in that oath. "Show me," she demanded. "Show me your true form." Zeus had no choice. He revealed himself, the full glory of the king of the gods, lightning made flesh, power beyond mortal comprehension, the being that had overthrown the Titans and reshaped the universe. For one instant, Semele saw everything. She saw the true face of divinity. And then she burned. The light was too bright. The power was too intense. Her mortal flesh couldn't contain what her eyes were seeing. She caught fire from the inside out. She had time to scream once before she was consumed. Her body turned to ash. Her chambers erupted in divine flames that spread through the palace. Zeus stood in the inferno, untouched, and in the ashes of his lover, he saw something moving, the baby, still alive, unburned somehow, protected by its divine blood. Zeus reached into the flames. He pulled the child free. It was barely formed, a fetus too young to survive outside the womb. But Zeus was a god. He took a knife. He cut open his own thigh. He placed the unborn child inside. He sealed the wound with lightning. The baby would gestate in his flesh. It would be born again later from his body. Born twice. First from his mother, then from his father. This was Dionysus. For 3 months, Zeus carried the child in his thigh. It was uncomfortable. It was undignified. The king of the gods, walking around Olympus with a pregnant leg, limping slightly, feeling the child kick against his divine flesh. The other gods whispered and laughed behind his back. "Have you seen Zeus lately?" they murmured, waddling around like a pregnant mortal, all for some dead woman's child. But Zeus endured it. For once in his existence, he took responsibility for a child he had created. He protected Dionysus in the one way he could, with his own body. He felt the child growing. He felt Dionysus's divine nature strengthening day by day. The baby was absorbing power from Zeus's flesh, becoming something more than mortal, becoming something that could survive in the world of gods. When the time came, Zeus cut open his thigh again. The wound blazed with golden light. Divine ichor, the blood of gods, flowed freely. And from the wound, the baby emerged, fully formed now, healthy, screaming with divine lungs that shook the halls of Olympus. A boy, a god, the god of wine and madness and ecstasy, the twice born, born first from his mother's womb, then from his father's flesh. No other god had ever entered the world this way. No other god ever would. But Zeus knew that the child wasn't safe yet. Hera's rage hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown. She had killed the mother, but the child had escaped her. She would certainly try again. Zeus gave the baby to Hermes. "Hide him," Zeus commanded. "Somewhere Hera won't look. Raise him among mortals. Don't tell anyone whose son he is. Don't even tell him until he's old enough to protect himself." Hermes took the child to the mountains of Nysa, a place so remote that even the gods rarely visited it. He gave the baby to nymphs to raise, the Hyades, who would love him as their own. To further protect him, Hermes transformed the baby into a goat. If Hera came looking for a divine infant, she wouldn't look twice at a young goat playing in the mountain meadows. And there, hidden from the world, disguised as an animal, Dionysus grew. As Dionysus grew, his powers emerged. Even as a child, he was different. He could make plants grow with a touch. He could speak to animals. He could sense things that others couldn't. The wildness that lurked beneath the surface of civilization. The chaos that waited just beyond the boundaries of order. And then he discovered wine. Some say he invented it, that he was the first to notice grapes fermenting on the vine, the first to taste the strange, sweet liquid that resulted, the first to feel the warmth spreading through his body, the loosening of inhibition, the gentle blurring of the world's hard edges. Others say wine already existed, but Dionysus perfected it. He learned to cultivate the grapes. He discovered how different soils and climates affected the flavor. He developed the techniques of fermentation that would be used for millennia. Either way, wine became his domain, his gift to humanity. But wine was never just about pleasure for Dionysus. It was never just about the taste or the warmth or the social lubrication. It was about release. It was about letting go of control. It was about the madness that lurks beneath the surface of every human mind. When Dionysus drank wine, he felt something loosen inside him. He felt the boundaries of his identity grow thin. He felt himself becoming more than himself, becoming part of something larger, something wilder, something that didn't care about rules or expectations or the careful structures that civilization had built. He felt his mother's presence. He felt the fire that had consumed her. He felt the boundary between sanity and madness grow thin, and he learned to share that feeling with others. His followers, the Maenads, from the Greek word for mad women, were women who had abandoned civilization to worship him. They left their homes, their husbands, their children. They went to the mountains and the forests, the wild places where Dionysus roamed. They danced through the night, drunk on wine and divine frenzy. They wore animal skins. They carried their soy, staffs wrapped in ivy and tipped with pine cones. They let their hair hang loose, matted and wild. And in their ecstasy, They became something more than human. They gained supernatural strength. They could tear animals apart with their bare hands, deer, wolves, even bulls. They could drink poison without being harmed. They were invulnerable to weapons. They were terrifying. And they were free. Free from the constraints of Greek society, which kept women confined and controlled. Free from the expectations of marriage and motherhood. Free from everything that told them who they were supposed to be. Dionysus offered humanity something no other god offered: escape. Escape from duty. Escape from reason. Escape from the crushing weight of being human. But escape came at a price. Some people, when they touched that wildness, couldn't come back. Some people lost themselves completely. That was the nature of Dionysus's gift. It could liberate. It could also destroy, just like wine itself. Hera never stopped hating Dionysus. She couldn't kill him. He was a god now, immortal, beyond her direct reach. But she could hurt him. She drove him mad. It happened suddenly. One day, Dionysus was traveling through Phrygia, spreading the worship of wine. The next day, he couldn't remember who he was. His mind shattered. His identity dissolved. He wandered the world, homeless and lost, not knowing his own name. For years, he was a madman, stumbling from country to country, muttering to himself, pursued by visions and terrors that no one else could see. Eventually, the goddess Rhea, his grandmother, the mother of Zeus, found him and cured him. She taught him the rites of purification. She restored his sanity, but the experience marked him. Dionysus had tasted madness from the inside. He knew what it felt like to lose yourself completely, and he brought that knowledge to his worship. The rites of Dionysus were not gentle. They were wild, dangerous, transformative. His followers risked losing themselves entirely. Some of them never came back. The most famous story of Dionysus's wrath involves his own cousin. Perseus was the king of Thebes, the city founded by Cadmus, the city where Semele had died. He was Dionysus's cousin through his mother, Agave. When Dionysus arrived in Thebes, claiming to be a god, claiming his place as a son of Zeus, Perseus refused to believe him. "This is no god," Perseus declared. "This is a fraud, a con man using wine and trickery to seduce our women." He ordered Dionysus arrested. His guards tried, but every chain they put on Dionysus fell away. Every cell they locked him in opened by itself. Every attempt to contain him failed. Dionysus found Perseus in the palace. "You refuse to worship me," the god said. "Fine, but I'll give you one chance to see the truth. Come with me to the mountains tonight. Watch my rites, see what my followers do. Then decide whether I'm a god." Perseus was curious despite himself. Maenads, including his own mother Agave, had been performing their rites on Mount Cithaeron. He wanted to see what actually happened. He went with Dionysus. The god dressed him in women's clothing, the costume of a Maenad. He told Perseus to hide in a tree and watch. Perseus climbed the tree. He looked down at the Maenads dancing below. They were in a frenzy. Their eyes were wild. They had moved beyond human reason into something animal, something divine. And then one of them looked up. "There's a man in the tree," she screamed. "A spy, a hunter." The Maenads swarmed the tree. They tore it from the ground with strength no human women should have possessed. Perseus fell. His mother Agave reached him first. She didn't recognize him. She was too deep in the divine madness. She saw only an enemy, an intruder. She tore his head from his body. She carried it back to Thebes in triumph, convinced she had killed a lion. Only when the madness faded did she realize what she had done. She had murdered her own son. Dionysus watched it all. He felt something. Maybe satisfaction, maybe regret, maybe both. This was the gift of wine. This was the curse of madness. This was what it meant to be a child of Zeus, power beyond measure and a capacity for destruction to match. Before Athena, there was Metis. Metis was a Titaness. Her name meant wisdom or cunning counsel. She was said to be the wisest being in the universe, wiser than the gods, wiser than the fates, wiser even than Zeus himself. Zeus loved her. More than that, he needed her. When he had waged war against his father Kronos, it was Metis who had devised the strategy. She had given him the potion that made Kronos vomit up Zeus's swallowed siblings. She had planned the campaign that led to victory. Without Metis, Zeus would never have become king. So naturally, when the war was over, he married her. But the union was troubled from the start. A prophecy hung over them. The same prophecy that had haunted Kronos. The same prophecy that had haunted Uranos before him. Your children will be greater than you. They will overthrow you. The cycle will continue. Zeus had used this prophecy against his father. Now it was being used against him. Specifically, the prophecy said that Metis would bear 2 children. The first would be a daughter, wise and powerful, but loyal to her father. The second would be a son who would become king of gods and men, a son who would overthrow Zeus. Zeus was not going to let that happen. When Metis became pregnant with their first child, Zeus made his move. He couldn't kill her. She was too wise. She would see any attack coming. She would escape or defend herself or turn his own weapons against him. But he could trick her. They were playing a game, a shape-shifting game that the gods enjoyed. Metis transformed into a lion. Zeus transformed into a bigger lion. Metis became an eagle. Zeus became a storm cloud. Back and forth, each trying to outdo the other. Transform into something small, Zeus suggested. Something I can't possibly match. Show me how clever you really are. Metis smiled. She loved displaying her abilities. She transformed into a fly. Zeus opened his mouth and swallowed her whole. In an instant, the wisest being in the universe was trapped inside the king of the gods. Metis didn't die. She couldn't die, but she was imprisoned forever in Zeus's belly. And she was still pregnant. Inside Zeus, Metis continued her work. She couldn't escape, but she could prepare her daughter for the world. She began crafting armor, forging weapons, building, with divine skill, everything her daughter would need. A helmet of bronze, a shield that blazed with divine light, a spear sharp enough to pierce anything. She dressed her unborn child in this armor. She taught her, somehow inside the god's belly. She prepared her for the moment of birth. Zeus, meanwhile, developed a headache. Not an ordinary headache. A headache that made him scream. A headache that made him roll on the ground, clutching his skull. A headache that felt like something was trying to split his head open from the inside. Because something was. The child was ready to be born. And there was no normal way out. Zeus begged the other gods for help. He screamed that his head was going to explode. He commanded them to do something, anything, to relieve the pressure. Hephaestus, the smith god, the craftsman, stepped forward. He raised his axe. He brought it down on Zeus's skull. The king of the gods' head split open, and from the wound something emerged. Athena stepped out of her father's skull, not as a baby, not as a child, as a fully grown woman, dressed in golden armor, carrying a spear and shield, ready for battle. She let out a war cry. The sound shook Olympus. The other gods staggered back in shock. Even Zeus, bleeding from his head, stared at his daughter with something like awe. She was perfect, tall and powerful, with gray eyes that seemed to see everything. Her face was beautiful but stern. Her bearing was that of a warrior and a queen. She had her mother's wisdom, her father's power, and something else, something uniquely her own. Restraint, unlike Zeus. Athena didn't act on impulse. She thought before she moved. She planned before she struck. She was strategy incarnate. Zeus looked at his daughter and felt something he rarely felt: trust. This child would not betray him. This child would not try to overthrow him. This child was on his side. He welcomed her to Olympus. He gave her a place of honor. He made her his favorite. And he never spoke of Metis again. Athena became the goddess of two things that might seem contradictory: wisdom and war. But to Athena, they were the same thing. War without wisdom was just violence, just destruction, just chaos consuming itself. Wisdom applied to war, strategy, tactics, planning, that was how you won. That was how you preserved what mattered, while destroying what threatened it. She was different from Ares, the other war god. Ares loved battle for its own sake. He loved the blood and the screaming and the chaos. He charged into fights without thinking. Athena thought. She planned. She maneuvered. When Athena fought, she fought to win, and she usually won. The Greeks loved her for this. She was their patron goddess, the protector of Athens, the guide of heroes. When Odysseus needed to find his way home, Athena helped him. When Perseus needed to slay Medusa, Athena gave him guidance. When the Greeks needed to conquer Troy, it was Athena who whispered the idea of the wooden horse. She was, in many ways, the most human of the gods. Not because she was weak. She was terrifyingly powerful, but because she valued craft and skill, because she respected mortals who used their minds, because she understood that intelligence was its own form of divinity. But Athena paid a price for her birth. She had no mother. Not really. Metis was still alive, technically, still trapped inside Zeus, still whispering wisdom to him. But Athena had never known her. She had never been held as a baby, never been nursed, never experienced the warmth of a mother's love. She emerged into the world fully formed, fully armed, fully alone. Some say this is why Athena remained a virgin goddess, why she never took lovers, never married, never had children. She didn't know how. She understood strategy. She understood warfare. She understood the crafts of weaving and pottery and metalwork. But she didn't understand intimacy. She didn't understand softness. She didn't understand how to be vulnerable. She was born from violence, an axe splitting her father's skull. And violence remained part of her nature. She could be kind. She could be generous. But there was always something cold at her core, something that had never learned to be warm. That was the legacy of being Zeus's only true daughter, the only child he kept close, the only child born from his own body. She was his, completely, and perhaps she was never quite her own. Leto was a titaness. She was gentle, kind, beautiful in a soft, unassuming way. Zeus noticed her. Zeus wanted her, and what Zeus wanted, Zeus took. She became pregnant with twins, divine twins, children of the king of the gods. And Hera once again discovered the affair. This time, Hera's punishment was creative. She didn't strike Leto directly. She didn't burn her or transform her. She cursed her to wander. No land under the sun will give you shelter, Hera decreed. No ground will let you rest. You will walk until your feet bleed, and no one will help you. And when your time comes to give birth, you will have nowhere to do it. It was a death sentence, essentially. Women didn't survive giving birth while walking. Leto wandered the world. She was massively pregnant. Her back ached. Her feet swelled. Every step was agony. She went to every country. She begged at every gate. Please, she said, just let me rest here long enough to give birth. Then I'll leave. I swear, it. But the word of Leto's curse had spread. No one wanted to anger Hera. No one wanted to be the land that sheltered Zeus's mistress. Every country turned her away. She walked for months. Her condition worsened. She could feel the twins inside her, ready to be born. But she had nowhere to deliver them. She was going to die. She was going to die walking, rejected by the whole world, bearing the children of the most powerful god in existence. There was an island called Delos. It wasn't much of an island. More of a floating rock, really. Tiny, barren, uninhabited. It wasn't anchored to the sea floor like other islands. It drifted with the currents. And because it drifted, because it wasn't fixed land, Hera's curse didn't quite apply to it. Leto found Delos. She begged the island itself for shelter. Let me stay here, she pleaded. Let me give birth. I swear on the river Styx that my son will make you famous. He will build a temple here. People will come from all over the world to worship at your shores. The island agreed. Leto collapsed on the rocky ground. The contractions started immediately. She had been holding back for months, waiting for a place to give birth. Now finally she could let go. But Hera had one more trick. She detained Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, on Olympus. Without Eileithyia's presence, no birth could be completed. Leto labored for 9 days and 9 nights. 9 days of contractions that went nowhere. 9 days of screaming and pushing and nothing happening. The babies were ready. Her body was ready. But the divine mechanism of birth was blocked. She was going to die. She was going to die in the middle of giving birth, on a tiny rock in the middle of the ocean, with no one to help her. The other goddesses took pity on Leto. They couldn't directly oppose Hera. No one wanted to face the queen's wrath. But they could bend the rules. They could find loopholes. They went to Olympus. They distracted Hera with a necklace, 9 yards of golden thread, woven with amber that glowed like captured sunlight. It was the most beautiful piece of jewelry ever created, and Hera, despite her fury, couldn't resist admiring it. While she was distracted, Eileithyia slipped away. The goddess of childbirth rushed to Delos. She found Leto in agony, barely conscious, clutching the trunk of a palm tree so tightly that her hands bled. "I'm here," Eileithyia said. "I'm here now." She knelt beside the laboring woman. She placed her divine hands on Leto's belly. She whispered the words that summoned birth into being. Artemis came first, a girl, silver-haired from the moment of her birth, with eyes like the moon. She slid out of her mother's body and immediately, impossibly, turned around. She looked at her mother, she looked at Eileithyia, and she said in a voice no newborn should have possessed, "I will help." She became her mother's midwife, a newborn goddess, minutes old, helping to deliver her twin brother. It should have been impossible. But Artemis had witnessed her mother's 9 days of suffering. She had felt every contraction from inside the womb. She had known that something was wrong, that help wasn't coming, that her mother was going to die. She wasn't going to let that happen. She took Eileithyia's hands and placed them where they needed to be. She whispered encouragement to Leto. She held the space between life and death open, refusing to let it close. Apollo emerged into the world. He came bathed in light, golden light, light that seemed to emanate from his skin, his eyes, his very essence. The moment he was born, the island of Delos blazed with radiance. The darkness that had covered the world for 9 days lifted. The sun returned to the sky, brighter than it had ever been. Swans circled the island 7 times, singing songs of welcome. The palm tree that Leto had clutched during her labor burst into bloom, flowers of gold and silver, fruit of amber and pearl. Twin gods had been born, the god of light, music, poetry, prophecy, healing, and plague, the goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, the moon, and childbirth, Apollo and Artemis, children of Zeus. Delos was transformed by their birth. The tiny floating island became sacred ground, one of the holiest sites in the Greek world. Temples would be built there. Pilgrims would come from every corner of the earth. But none of that mattered to Leto in that moment. All that mattered was that her children were alive. She held them both, one in each arm, and wept with joy. For the first time in 9 days, she slept. From the beginning, the twins were deadly. Artemis had witnessed her mother's suffering. She had spent 9 days in the womb, listening to Leto scream, feeling her pain, knowing that Hera was responsible. She never forgave. She never forgot. By the time she was 4 days old, she went to Zeus. "Father," she said, "I want to make requests." Zeus was amused, his newborn daughter speaking in complete sentences, asking for favors. "Ask." "I want eternal virginity. I never want to marry. I never want to be vulnerable the way my mother was vulnerable." "Granted." "I want a bow and arrows, the finest ever made." "Granted." "I want a hunting pack, 60 nymphs, all virgins who will serve me forever." "Granted." "I want the wilderness as my domain, the forests, the mountains, the wild places where civilization has not reached." "Granted." "And I want the moon. Let my brother have the sun. The moon will be mine." Zeus granted all her requests. Artemis became the goddess of the hunt. She roamed the wild places with her nymphs, tracking deer and boar and wolves. She lived outside the rules of civilization, answering to no one. But she was also the goddess of protection. She protected young women, especially those on the cusp of adulthood. Girls prayed to her for guidance, for safety, for the strength to control their own fates. She protected women in childbirth. She remembered her mother's suffering, and she would never let another woman face that alone. And she protected her mother fiercely, violently. Anyone who threatened Leto, anyone who insulted her, died. Tityos, a giant who tried to assault Leto, was shot full of arrows and sent to Tartarus for eternal punishment. Niobe, who boasted she was a better mother than Leto, watched her 14 children die. Orion, the great hunter who tried to assault Artemis herself, was killed by a scorpion she sent. Actaeon, who saw her bathing, was torn apart by his own dogs. Artemis was beautiful. She was protective. She was kind to those who deserved kindness. But cross her, and you died. Apollo was equally dangerous, though in different ways. He was the god of light, the sun that warmed the earth, that made crops grow, that drove away darkness. He was the god of music. The lyre was his invention, and no mortal or god could match his skill. He was the god of poetry. He inspired the greatest artists humanity ever produced. He was the god of prophecy. He established the oracle at Delphi, the most sacred prophetic site in the ancient world. He was the god of healing. His son Asclepius became the first physician, and medicine itself was Apollo's gift to humanity. But he was also the god of plague. He could send arrows of sickness into a population as easily as arrows of inspiration. Disease was his domain. Pestilence was his tool. When the Greeks offended him during the siege of Troy, he walked through their camp at night, firing plague arrows into the sleeping soldiers. They died by the hundreds, rotting where they fell, their bodies blackening with disease. He killed Python, the great serpent that guarded Delphi, with a single arrow through its eye. He killed the Cyclopes, the one-eyed giants who had forged Zeus's thunderbolts. In a fit of rage, after Zeus killed his son, he killed the Satyr-Marsyas, flaying him alive for daring to challenge him to a musical contest. Apollo was beautiful and terrible, creative and destructive, the light that gives life and the light that burns. The twins were their father's children. They had inherited his power and his capacity for cruelty. Despite everything, Apollo and Artemis were among the most beloved gods. Apollo established the oracle at Delphi, the most sacred prophetic site in the ancient world. Kings and peasants alike came to hear the future from his priestess. His prophecies shaped the course of history. He was the patron of music and poetry. He led the muses in their eternal song. He inspired the greatest artists humanity ever produced. He was the god of healing as well as plague. His son Asclepius became the first physician. Medicine itself was Apollo's gift to humanity. Artemis, meanwhile, roamed the wild places. She protected the forests, the animals, the untamed spaces where civilization had not yet reached. She was the patron of young women. Girls on the cusp of adulthood prayed to her. Women in childbirth called her name. She represented freedom, the freedom of the wilderness, the freedom of being untamed, the freedom of answering to no man. The twins balanced each other, light and moon, civilization and wilderness, order and freedom. Together, they embodied something essential about the Greek understanding of the world. Divinity was not gentle. The gods were not safe. They could create and they could destroy, often in the same breath, but they were beautiful, and sometimes that was enough. Zeus saw Alcmene and wanted her. She was a mortal woman, married to a general named Amphitryon. She was known for her beauty, but also for her virtue. She was faithful to her husband. She loved him completely. Zeus didn't care. He wanted her, so he took her. But Alcmene was too smart to be tricked by obvious disguises, so Zeus transformed himself into her husband. He came to her in Amphitryon's form, on a night when the real Amphitryon was away at war. Alcmene welcomed him into her bed, believing he was her husband returned early. Zeus made that night last, literally. He commanded the sun not to rise. He extended a single night to the length of 3. When the real Amphitryon returned the next day, Alcmene was confused. Hadn't he just been here? Hadn't they just spent a long, passionate night together? Amphitryon was confused too. He had been away at war. He hadn't been anywhere near home. Eventually, the seer Tiresias explained what had happened. Zeus had visited Alcmene. She was pregnant with the king of the gods' child. Amphitryon was horrified, furious, humiliated. But what could he do? You couldn't fight Zeus. You couldn't demand satisfaction from the king of the gods. He could only accept it. He raised the child, who was named Heracles, meaning glory of Hera, as his own. The name was meant to appease the queen of the gods. It didn't work. From the moment Heracles was born, Hera hated him. He was living proof of her husband's infidelity. Every time she looked at him, she saw Zeus's betrayal. She tried to kill him immediately. She sent 2 serpents into his cradle, massive snakes, venomous, designed to strangle the infant in his sleep. Heracles woke up. He was 8 months old. A normal baby would have been helpless. Heracles grabbed a snake in each hand. He squeezed. His infant fists crushed the serpents' skulls. He killed them both before his parents even entered the room. When Alcmene and Amphitryon arrived, they found their baby laughing, playing with the dead snakes like toys. That was when they realized Heracles was not normal. That was when they realized what Zeus's blood meant. Heracles grew into the strongest man who ever lived. He was tall and massively muscled. He could wrestle lions. He could uproot trees. He could divert rivers with his bare hands. But he was also kind, gentle when he wanted to be. He had a good heart. He married a woman named Megara. They had children, 2 sons who were his world. He settled into a happy life. Hera watched. She had failed to kill him as a baby. She had failed to stop him from growing into a hero. Now he was happy, with a family, finally at peace. She couldn't allow that. She struck him with madness. One evening, Heracles was sitting with his family. His sons were playing. His wife was weaving. It was a perfect, peaceful moment. Then his vision shifted. Suddenly, he didn't see his wife and children. He saw enemies, monsters, threats that needed to be eliminated. He drew his bow. He killed his sons first. Quick, efficient arrows. They didn't even understand what was happening. Megara tried to run. He caught her. He strangled her with his bare hands. Then he turned to look for more enemies. Athena appeared. She struck him with a stone, knocking him unconscious before he could hurt anyone else. When he woke up, he was surrounded by bodies, his children, his wife, his entire family, and he remembered everything. He remembered killing them. He remembered the madness that had seized him, but he also remembered that his hands had done the work. His strength had ended their lives. Hera watched from Olympus, satisfied. Heracles wanted to die. He went to the oracle at Delphi, asking how he could atone, how he could make amends for what he had done. The oracle gave him terrible news. Go to King Eurystheus of Mycenae. Serve him for 12 years. Complete whatever labors he assigns you. Only then will you be purified. Eurystheus was a small, petty man. He was terrified of Heracles, and he was Hera's devoted servant. He designed 12 labors specifically to kill Heracles. The first labor, kill the Nemean lion. This was not an ordinary lion. It was a monster, a child of Typhon and Echidna, sent by Hera to terrorize the region of Nemea. Its size was immense, larger than any natural lion, larger than a bull. Its roar could be heard from miles away. Its appetite was insatiable, but its most dangerous feature was its skin. The skin was impervious to weapons. Arrows bounced off it like it was bronze armor. Swords shattered against it. Spears couldn't find purchase. Many heroes had tried to kill the Nemean lion. They had come with the finest weapons, the sharpest blades, the most powerful bows. They had all died. Heracles went to Nemea. He tracked the lion to its cave. He shot arrow after arrow. Every arrow bounced away harmlessly. He drew his sword, a fine blade, forged by the best smiths in Greece. The sword shattered on the lion's hide. The lion lunged at him. Heracles barely dodged. Its claws raked his arm, drawing blood. This beast could hurt him, but he couldn't hurt it. Most men would have run. Heracles threw away his weapons. He grabbed the lion with his bare hands. It was like wrestling a living mountain. The lion thrashed and roared. Its claws tore at Heracles' back. Its jaws snapped inches from his face. But Heracles was the strongest man who had ever lived. He got his arms around the lion's throat. He squeezed. The lion struggled. It fought. It slowly suffocated. When it finally went limp, Heracles held on for another minute just to be sure. Then he tried to skin it. His knife couldn't cut the hide. Nothing could cut the hide. Finally, he had an idea. He used the lion's own claws, the only things sharp enough, to slice through the skin. He wore the Nemean lion's skin as armor for the rest of his life. Its head became his helmet. Its invulnerable hide protected him from weapons that would have killed any other man. Eurystheus, when he saw Heracles return wearing the lion's skin, was terrified. He had hoped the lion would kill Heracles. Now he would have to find something worse. The second labor? Kill the Lernaean hydra, a serpent with 9 heads. It lived in a swamp near the city of Lerna, and its very breath was poisonous. Even approaching it was dangerous. But that wasn't the worst part. Every time you cut off one of its heads, 2 more grew in its place. Heracles arrived at the swamp with his nephew Iolaus, who served as his charioteer. He shot flaming arrows into the hydra's den, forcing it out into the open. Then he attacked. He swung his club and crushed a head. 2 new heads grew from the stump. He cut off another head with his sword. 2 more grew. He was making things worse. The hydra now had more heads than when he started. They were snapping at him from every direction. The poisonous breath was making him dizzy. And then Hera sent help for the hydra. A giant crab emerged from the swamp and clamped onto Heracles' foot. He was fighting the hydra with one leg immobilized. Heracles crushed the crab with his free foot. But he was losing. Iolaus had an idea. "The stumps!" his nephew shouted. "Cauterize them. Stop the heads from growing back." Iolaus gathered branches and lit them on fire. Every time Heracles cut off a head, Iolaus pressed the burning branches against the stump. The fire seared the wound shut. No new heads could grow. One by one they worked through the hydra's heads. 8 mortal heads, burned and gone. But the 9th head, the central head, was immortal. It couldn't be killed. Heracles cut it off anyway. He buried it under a massive boulder where it remains to this day, still alive, still biting at the rock above it. He dipped his arrows in the hydra's blood. The poison was incredibly potent. A scratch from one of these arrows would kill anything. When Heracles returned to Eurystheus, the king said the labor didn't count. "You had help," Eurystheus said. "Iolaus helped you, that's cheating." But he still had to acknowledge that the hydra was dead. 1 labor down, 11 to go. The third labor, capture the Ceryneian hind, a deer sacred to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. It had golden antlers and bronze hooves. It was the most beautiful animal in existence. It was also the fastest. The Ceryneian hind could outrun anything. Horses, dogs, even the wind itself. No hunter had ever caught it. No hunter had ever come close. Heracles chased it for an entire year. He followed it across Greece, over mountains, through forests, across rivers. Every time he thought he was getting close, the hind would bound away, impossibly fast, leaving him exhausted and frustrated. He tried traps. The hind avoided them. He tried driving it toward barriers. The hind leaped over them. He tried ambushes. The hind sensed them coming. For 12 months, Heracles did nothing but chase. He barely slept. He barely ate. He became obsessed. Finally, as the hind was drinking from a stream, exhausted from the endless chase, Heracles saw his chance. He shot it in the leg. A careful shot. Precise. The arrow passed through the leg without hitting any major blood vessels. The hind was wounded, but not dying. He caught it while it was limping. He was carrying it back to Eurystheus when Artemis appeared. The goddess was furious. Her sacred animal, wounded by a mortal. "I could kill you for this," Artemis said. Her bow was in her hand. Her expression was cold. Heracles explained. He told her about Hera, about the murder of his family, about the labors he had to complete to atone. "I had no choice," he said. "I don't want to hurt your deer. I just have to show it to Eurystheus, and then I'll release it." Artemis considered. "Fine," she said finally. "But if any permanent harm comes to my hind, I will hunt you across the world." Heracles kept his word. He showed the hind to Eurystheus, and then he let it go. It bounded away into the forest, fully healed, as fast as ever. 3 labors down, 9 to go. The 4th labor, capture the Erymanthian boar, a massive, savage boar that was terrorizing the countryside. It lived on Mount Erymanthus and descended to kill livestock, destroy crops, and sometimes attack villagers. Heracles hunted it through the mountains for weeks. The boar was cunning. It knew it was being hunted, and it kept moving, never staying in one place long enough to be caught. On his way, Heracles stopped to visit a centaur named Pholus. The centaur offered him wine from a communal jar that belonged to all the centaurs. The smell of the wine attracted other centaurs, who became angry that their wine was being shared. They attacked. Heracles defended himself. He killed many of them with his poisoned arrows. The rest fled. But in the chaos, Pholus picked up one of the arrows to examine it. How could a simple arrow cause such devastation? He dropped it. It pierced his foot. The Hydra's poison killed him within minutes. Heracles mourned his host and continued his hunt. He finally caught the boar by driving it into deep snow, where its short legs couldn't move effectively. He bound it and carried it back to Mycenae. Eurystheus was so terrified when he saw the living boar that he hid in a bronze jar. From that point on, he refused to meet Heracles face to face, delivering his orders through a herald instead. The 5th labor, clean the Augean stables. King Augeas of Elis had thousands of cattle, more than any man in Greece. His herds were legendary, but his stables hadn't been cleaned in 30 years. 30 years of dung, mountains of filth. The stench could be smelled from miles away. Eurystheus thought this labor would humiliate Heracles, the greatest hero in the world, reduced to shoveling manure. Heracles had a different idea. He surveyed the stables. He noted the landscape. He walked along the nearby rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus, and made calculations. Then he made a deal with King Augeas. "If I clean your stables in a single day," Heracles said, "you'll give me 1/10 of your cattle?" Augeas laughed. "Clean them in a day? Impossible? But fine. If you can do it, you can have the cattle." Heracles went to work. He dug channels from both rivers, redirecting their flow toward the stables. The water of the Alpheus and the Peneus rushed through the filthy buildings, washing away 30 years of accumulated dung in a matter of hours. By sunset, the stables were cleaner than they had ever been. Augeas refused to pay. He claimed the rivers had done the work, not Heracles. Heracles was furious, but he had other labors to complete. He would remember this insult. When Eurystheus heard how the labor had been completed, he said it didn't count. "You used the rivers to help you," the king said, "and you tried to get paid. That's cheating. Do another one." 2 labors declared invalid. Heracles' sentence was extended, but he kept going. The 6th labor: kill the Stymphalian birds, man-eating birds that lived near Lake Stymphalus. They had bronze beaks that could pierce armor. They had metallic feathers. They could launch like arrows. Thousands of them. An entire flock of death. Heracles couldn't get close enough to shoot them. Every time he approached, they filled the air with razor-sharp feathers. Athena appeared to him. She gave him a rattle made by Hephaestus, a device that made a terrible noise, loud enough to frighten even divine creatures. Heracles shook the rattle. The noise was unlike anything the birds had heard. They panicked. They launched into the air in a chaotic mass. And while they were flying, confused and disorganized, Heracles shot them down, arrow after arrow. His poisoned shafts killed them instantly. Most of the flock died. Survivors fled to a distant island, never to return. The 7th labor: capture the Cretan bull. The same bull that had fathered the Minotaur. It had been sent by Poseidon years ago, meant as a sacrifice. King Minos had kept it instead, and as punishment, Poseidon had made Minos' wife fall in love with it. The result was the Minotaur, a monster with a man's body and a bull's head, locked in a labyrinth beneath Crete. The bull itself was still alive, still dangerous, still rampaging across the island. Heracles went to Crete. He found the bull. He wrestled it into submission with his bare hands. He rowed it across the sea back to Greece, the bull swimming while Heracles clung to its back. When he delivered it to Eurystheus, the king released it. The bull wandered to Marathon, where it terrorized the countryside until Theseus finally killed it. The 8th labor: steal the mares of Diomedes. King Diomedes of Thrace had 4 horses, beautiful horses, the fastest horses in the world. They ate human flesh. Diomedes fed them prisoners of war, enemies, anyone who displeased him. The horses had developed a taste for human meat. Heracles went to Thrace with a group of companions. They found the horses in their stables, chained to bronze feeding troughs. They stole them in the night. But Diomedes discovered the theft. He pursued with his army. Heracles told his companions to take the horses to the sea while he fought Diomedes. The fight was brief. Heracles killed the king with a single blow. Then he had an idea. He fed Diomedes' body to the horses. The man who had spent years feeding humans to these animals became their final meal, and after eating their master, the horses became calm, tame. They never ate human flesh again. Heracles brought them back to Eurystheus, who dedicated them to Hera. They lived out their lives in a field near Argos, grazing peacefully, as if they had never tasted blood. The 9th labor. Obtain the belt of Hippolyta. Hippolyta was the queen of the Amazons, a nation of warrior women who lived at the edge of the known world. They were the daughters of Ares, raised for battle, afraid of nothing. Hippolyta's belt was a gift from her father, the god of war. It was a symbol of her authority, her power, her right to rule. Eurystheus wanted it. His daughter wanted it. So Heracles was sent to take it. He sailed to the land of the Amazons with a crew of warriors. They expected a fight. Instead, Hippolyta came to meet them at the shore. She had heard of Heracles. She admired his strength. She was impressed by the labors he had already completed. She was willing to give him the belt. "You've earned it," she said. "Take it with my blessing." Heracles reached out to accept it, and then Hera intervened. The goddess disguised herself as an Amazon. She ran through the city spreading rumors. "Heracles is kidnapping the queen. He's going to carry her off to Greece. We have to stop him." The Amazons believed it. They charged to the harbor, weapons drawn. In the confusion of the battle, Heracles killed Hippolyta. He didn't know it was a misunderstanding. He only knew that the Amazons were attacking, and their queen was in the way. He took her belt from her dead body. Another death that wasn't his fault. Another life destroyed by Hera's hatred. The 10th labor. Capture the cattle of Geryon. Geryon was a giant who lived on an island at the very edge of the world. He had 3 bodies, 3 heads, 6 arms, 6 legs, all connected at the waist. His cattle were famous, red, beautiful, the finest herd in existence. They were guarded by a 2-headed dog named Orthrus and a giant herdsman named Eurytion. Heracles killed Orthrus with his club. He killed Eurytion with an arrow. He killed Geryon himself, all 3 bodies, with a single shot through all 3 chests. Then he herded the cattle back to Greece. It took months. The cattle were unruly. Bandits tried to steal them. Monsters tried to eat them. Gods interfered at every turn. Hera sent a gadfly to scatter the herd. Heracles had to round them up again. A local king tried to steal some. Heracles killed him. A fire-breathing giant blocked his path. Heracles killed him too. By the time he reached Mycenae, he had crossed an entire continent on foot, fighting every step of the way. Eurystheus sacrificed the cattle to Hera. 10 labors done, 2 to go. The 11th labor. Steal the apples of the Hesperides, golden apples that granted immortality. They were guarded by a dragon and by the daughters of Atlas. Heracles convinced Atlas to retrieve the apples for him. In exchange, Heracles held up the sky while Atlas was gone. Atlas tried to trick Heracles into holding the sky forever. Heracles tricked him back. The 12th labor. Capture Cerberus, the 3-headed dog that guarded the entrance to the underworld. Heracles descended into Hades. He found the beast. He wrestled it into submission without using weapons. That was the condition Hades set. He dragged Cerberus up to the surface, showed it to Eurystheus, and then returned it to its place in the underworld. 12 labors. 12 impossible tasks. Heracles completed them all, but he wasn't free of suffering. The labors were just the beginning. He would go on to more adventures, more pain, more death. He would marry again and have more children. He would commit more murders when Hera drove him mad again. Eventually, he would die. killed by his own wife, who poisoned him by accident, trying to use a love potion that turned out to be acid. He burned alive on a funeral pyre, screaming in agony. But because he was Zeus's son, he didn't stay dead. His mortal part burned away. His divine part ascended to Olympus. He became a god, and Hera finally, after a lifetime of tormenting him, accepted him as her son. Some say she even let him marry her daughter, Hebe, the goddess of youth. A happy ending after everything. But at what cost? A wife and children murdered by his own hands. A lifetime of servitude. Labors that should have killed him a dozen times over. That was what it meant to be a child of Zeus. Power beyond measure, and suffering to match. Acrisius, king of Argos, had a problem. He had only one child, a daughter named Danae. He wanted a son, an heir to continue his line. He consulted the oracle at Delphi. The oracle's response was not what he hoped for. "You will never have a son, but your daughter will have a son, and that grandson will kill you." Acrisius was terrified. He could have killed Danae. That would have solved the problem. No daughter, no grandson, no death. But killing your own child was a crime against the gods. It brought divine punishment. It was almost as bad as the prophecy itself. Instead, he locked her up. He built a bronze chamber underground. No windows, no doors. The only opening was a small gap in the ceiling, through which food could be lowered. No man could reach Danae. No man could father a child with her. The prophecy would be thwarted. Acrisius forgot that Zeus was not a man. Zeus saw Danae in her bronze prison. He watched her through the tiny gap in the ceiling. He saw her beauty. He saw her loneliness. He wanted her. He transformed himself into a shower of gold, liquid light pouring through the gap in the ceiling, pooling around Danae's feet. She thought it was divine. She thought a god was visiting her. She was right. The gold touched her, surrounded her, entered her. And when it receded, she was pregnant. Months later, she gave birth to a son. She named him Perseus. When Acrisius heard the baby crying from inside the bronze chamber, he knew immediately what had happened. The prophecy was coming true. Despite everything he had done, his daughter had a son, a grandson who would kill him. He still couldn't bring himself to kill them directly, but he could abandon them to fate. He put Danae and baby Perseus in a wooden chest. He sealed it shut. He threw it into the sea. If they drowned, it wouldn't be murder. It would be the will of the gods. Acrisius's hands would be clean. The chest floated. For days, it drifted across the Aegean. Inside, Danae held her baby and prayed. She had no food, no water, only the small amount of air trapped in the chest. She was dying, but someone was watching. Zeus guided the chest to the island of Seriphos. It washed up on the beach where a fisherman named Dictys found it. He opened the chest. Inside, he found a beautiful woman and a baby boy, barely alive. He took them home. He nursed them back to health. He raised Perseus as his own son. Zeus's child had survived. Dictys had a brother named Polydectes. Polydectes was the king of Seriphos. He was not a kind man. He was greedy, cruel, and lustful. When he saw Danae, he wanted her. She refused him. She had no interest in marrying anyone, let alone a petty tyrant. But Polydectes was patient. He would wait. He would wear her down. The problem was Perseus. The boy had grown into a man, a strong man. He was protective of his mother, and he had made it clear that Polydectes would never have her. Polydectes needed to get rid of Perseus. He devised a plan. He announced that he was going to marry a different woman, a princess from another island. He demanded wedding gifts from all his subjects, horses specifically. Everyone had to bring horses. Perseus had no horses. He was a fisherman's son. He had nothing, but he had pride. "I'll bring you something better than horses," Perseus declared. "I'll bring you the head of Medusa." The court fell silent. Medusa was one of the Gorgons, monsters whose gaze turned anyone who looked at them to stone. No one had ever killed a Gorgon. No one had ever come close. Polydectes smiled. "Very well," he said. "Bring me Medusa's head. And if you fail?" He didn't need to finish the sentence. If Perseus failed, he would be dead, and Danae would have no protector. Perseus set out on his quest, armed with nothing but his own courage. He had no idea where the Gorgons lived. He had no idea how to kill something whose very gaze was death. He had made a boast he couldn't fulfill, and now he was going to die for it, unless the gods helped him. He wandered for days, trying to find information about the Gorgons. No one knew anything. The Gorgons lived at the edge of the world, beyond the maps, beyond the knowledge of ordinary mortals. Perseus was about to give up when two figures appeared before him on a lonely road, Athena and Hermes. Two gods standing in the dust, looking at him with something like interest. "You're Zeus's son," Athena said. It wasn't a question. "I am." "And you're trying to kill Medusa." "I am." The goddess studied him. Her gray eyes seemed to see right through him. "Medusa was beautiful once," Athena said. "The most beautiful woman in the world. Men traveled from distant lands just to see her face. Poets wrote songs about her." "What happened?" Athena's expression hardened. "Poseidon happened. He saw her beauty and wanted it. He attacked her in my temple, on my sacred ground. That's terrible." "Yes, it was." Athena's voice was cold. "And I punished her for it." Perseus didn't understand. "You punished her, but she was the victim. She defiled my temple. It doesn't matter how or why. My temple was defiled, and someone had to pay the price." The goddess paused. "I turned her beautiful hair into snakes. I made her face so hideous that anyone who looked at it turned to stone. I transformed her from the most beautiful woman in the world into a monster." "That's not justice?" "No," Athena agreed. "It's not, but it's what happened, and now you're going to kill her." Perseus was silent for a moment. "I don't have a choice. None of us do." Athena reached into her robes and produced a shield, bronze, polished to a perfect mirror shine. "Take this. The Gorgons live at the edge of the world, in a cave where no sunlight reaches. You can't look directly at Medusa, or you'll turn to stone. Use this shield as a mirror. Look at her reflection, and you'll be safe." Hermes stepped forward. He was carrying a sword, curved, gleaming with strange light. "Adamantine," Hermes said. "Unbreakable. The only metal that can cut a Gorgon's neck. Their skin is tough as bronze. Ordinary weapons won't work." "Thank you," Perseus said, taking the weapons. "But I still don't know where to find them." "That's because you need 3 more things," Athena said. "The cap of Hades, which makes the wearer invisible, the winged sandals of Hermes, which allow flight, and the kibisis, a magical bag that can contain Medusa's head without letting its power escape." "Where do I get these things?" "From the Hesperides, the nymphs at the edge of the world. They guard the golden apples, but they also keep these items. How do I find the Hesperides? From the Grey sisters. They share one eye and one tooth between them. They know everything, including the location of the Hesperides, but they won't tell you willingly. You'll have to be persuasive. Hermes smiled. Steal the eye while they're passing it between them. They'll tell you anything to get it back. Perseus nodded. He had a path now, difficult, dangerous, but possible. One more thing, Athena said. When you face Medusa, remember who she was. Remember that she didn't choose to become a monster. She was made into one. By me. Why are you telling me this? Athena's gray eyes were unreadable. Because someone should know. Because someone should remember. Even monsters have stories. The gods disappeared, leaving Perseus alone on the road with his new weapons and his new knowledge. He had a long journey ahead of him. The Grey were ancient. They had been old when the world was young. 3 sisters, Dano, Enyo, and Pemphredo, sharing one eye and one tooth between them, passing them back and forth as needed. They lived in a cave at the edge of the known world, where the land gave way to mist and darkness. No sunlight reached them. No travelers visited. Except Perseus. He found their cave after weeks of travel. He heard them before he saw them. 3 voices, bickering and complaining, arguing about whose turn it was to use the eye. Give it to me. You just had it. I didn't look at anything interesting. That's not my fault. Perseus waited in the shadows, watching. The sisters were horrible to look at. Gray-skinned, withered, ancient beyond imagining. One held the eye, a single orb that glowed faintly in the darkness. Another held the tooth, yellowed and sharp. They passed the eye between them constantly, never letting it rest, each sister desperate for her turn to see. Perseus watched the pattern. He memorized the timing. And when one sister removed the eye to pass it to another, when the eye was in transit, belonging to no one, he reached out and grabbed it. What? Who's there? Where's the eye? What happened to the eye? The sisters stumbled around, blind, clutching at the air. They bumped into each other. They knocked over their meager possessions. I have it, Perseus said, stepping out of the shadows. The sisters froze. Who are you? Dano demanded, her empty eye socket turning toward the sound of his voice. A traveler. I need information. Give us back our eye. After you tell me what I need to know. We'll never help you. I'll throw the eye into the sea, Perseus said calmly. You'll be blind forever. Or you can answer one question and get it back. The sisters conferred in urgent whispers. They threatened. They begged. They tried to bargain. Perseus waited. Finally, they gave in. What do you want to know? How do I find the Hesperides? The sisters told him. They described the path in detail, across the sea, past the mountains at the edge of the world, through the garden where the golden apples grew. When they were finished, Perseus tossed the eye back to them. They caught it greedily, fighting over who got to look first. Perseus was already gone. The Hesperides were beautiful. 3 nymphs, or perhaps 7, the number varied in different tellings, who lived in a garden at the western edge of the world. The sun set behind their home every evening, painting their garden in shades of gold and rose. They tended the golden apple trees that Hera had received as a wedding gift. They sang songs that no mortal had ever heard. They lived in perfect eternal peace. Perseus found them in their garden, surrounded by trees laden with golden fruit, with a dragon coiled around the largest tree. They weren't surprised to see him. They had known he was coming. "Son of Zeus," the eldest said, "you seek tools to kill the Gorgon?" "I do." "We can give them to you. But do you understand what you're asking?" "I'm asking for weapons." "You're asking to kill a woman who never chose her fate. A woman who was violated and then punished for being violated. A woman who has lived in darkness and isolation for centuries, hated and feared, knowing that someday someone would come to cut off her head." Perseus hesitated. "I have no choice. If I don't bring back Medusa's head—" "Your mother suffers, yes, we know." The nymph's voice was kind but sad. "That's how it always is. Someone always suffers. The only question is who." She gave him the cap of Hades, a simple leather cap, unremarkable in appearance, but when Perseus put it on, he vanished completely. She gave him the winged sandals, golden wings attached to the ankles, which lifted him into the air the moment he strapped them on. She gave him the kibisis, a bag woven from light itself, which could contain anything, no matter how dangerous. "Go," the Hesperid said, "do what you must, and when you stand over Medusa's body, remember that she was a victim long before she was a monster." Perseus flew east toward the land of the Gorgons. He tried not to think about what he was about to do. He found them sleeping. The land of the Gorgons was at the very edge of the world, where the ocean met the void. It was a place of perpetual twilight, not dark, not light, but something in between. A gray, colorless realm where shadows had no edges and sound didn't carry. The Gorgons lived in a cave. Perseus approached using the winged sandals, flying low and silent. He wore the cap of Hades, invisible to anyone who might be watching. He landed at the mouth of the cave. The smell hit him first, blood and decay, the stench of death. Around the entrance, stone figures were scattered like forgotten statues. Except they weren't statues. They were people, mortals who had come here, who had looked at the Gorgons, who had been frozen forever in their last moment of terror. Some were warriors, weapons raised, caught mid-charge. Some were explorers, hands lifted to shield their eyes. Some were young and some were old, and all of them were dead. Perseus stepped around them carefully. Inside the cave, he found the Gorgons. 3 sisters, Stheno, Euryale, and Medusa. They lay on a rocky outcropping, their bodies entwined like sleeping serpents. Their skin was scaled, tinged with green. Their hands ended in bronze claws. Their snake hair writhed even in sleep, hissing and coiling. Only Medusa was mortal. The other 2, Stheno and Euryale, were immortal, invulnerable. Even if Perseus wanted to kill them, he couldn't. But Medusa could die, and that was his target. Perseus took out his shield, the mirror-bright bronze that Athena had given him. He turned his back to the Gorgons and held the shield up, watching their reflections. The reflection couldn't hurt him, only the direct gaze. He saw Medusa clearly now. Her face was not what he expected. In the stories, in the warnings, the Gorgons were described as pure monsters, hideous, grotesque. But Medusa's face, even distorted by the mirror, held traces of beauty. The bone structure that had once made her the most beautiful woman in the world was still there beneath the scales and the snakes. Her lips, though gray, were perfectly shaped. Her closed eyes had long lashes. She had been beautiful. Athena had told him that. But seeing it, seeing the remnants of that beauty, corrupted and transformed, was different. This was a woman, a victim, someone who had suffered. And he was going to kill her. Perseus raised his sword, the adamantine blade, unbreakable, sharp enough to cut divine flesh. He approached the Gorgons backward, watching the reflection, moving slowly. His sandals made no sound. His invisible body cast no shadow. Closer, closer. He was standing over Medusa now. He could see her chest rising and falling with breath. He could see her snake hair shifting, sensing something wrong, but not waking. He positioned the blade at her neck. One stroke. Quick. She might not even feel it. He swung. The adamantine blade cut through Medusa's neck in a single, perfect arc. There was no resistance. The sword passed through flesh and bone and sinew like they weren't even there. Medusa's head fell free. Her body convulsed once, twice. Her bronze claws scraped against the rock. Her snake hair thrashed wildly, and from her neck, from the stump where her head had been, blood sprayed in a fountain. But it wasn't just blood. From the blood, something emerged. A horse, a winged horse, pure white, with wings like an eagle's, eyes like diamonds. It burst forth fully formed, shaking blood from its feathers, neighing with a voice like thunder. Pegasus. And beside the horse, a giant. A man, twice the size of any mortal, with golden skin and a golden sword in his hand. Chrysaor, children of Poseidon, conceived when the sea god had assaulted Medusa in Athena's temple. They had been growing inside her ever since, unable to be born, trapped by her transformed body. Now, finally, they were free. Pegasus spread his wings and flew toward the sky. Chrysaor strode off toward the horizon. Neither of them looked at Perseus. Neither of them cared about their mother's killer. They were just glad to be alive. Perseus didn't watch them go. He grabbed Medusa's head, keeping his eyes firmly on the wall, and stuffed it into the kibisis. The magical bag accepted it without resistance, containing its deadly power. Behind him, Stheno and Euryale were waking up. Their screams when they saw their sister's body were terrible. High, keening wails that seemed to shake the very stones. They launched themselves into the air, searching for the killer. But Perseus was invisible, and he could fly. He rose into the gray sky, leaving the Gorgons shrieking behind him. The deed was done. Medusa was dead, and he had her head in his bag. On his way home, Perseus had adventures. He flew over the coast of Ethiopia and saw a beautiful woman chained to a rock, waves crashing around her, waiting to be devoured by a sea monster. Her name was Andromeda. She was a princess. Her mother, Queen Cassiopeia, had boasted that Andromeda was more beautiful than the sea nymphs. Poseidon, offended on behalf of the nymphs, had sent a monster to destroy the coast. The only way to appease the monster was to sacrifice Andromeda. Perseus landed on the rock beside her. "I can save you," he said. "The monster is too powerful," Andromeda replied. "Nothing can kill it." "I have something that can." The monster emerged from the sea, a serpent larger than any ship, with scales like armor and teeth like swords. It lunged toward the rock where Andromeda was chained. Perseus pulled Medusa's head from the bag. He turned it toward the monster. The serpent's eyes met Medusa's dead gaze. It froze. Gray spread from its eyes across its face, down its neck, along its body. Within seconds, the entire creature was stone. A massive statue, frozen in mid-lunge, crashing into the sea and sinking slowly beneath the waves. Perseus freed Andromeda from her chains. He asked her to marry him. She said yes. They flew together back to her parents' kingdom to announce the engagement. But Andromeda had already been promised to another man, a prince named Phineus, who had stood by and watched while she was chained to a rock, who had done nothing to save her. Phineus arrived at the wedding feast with an army. "She's mine," he declared. "You can't have her." Perseus looked at the army, hundreds of men, armed and armored. He looked at Andromeda. He looked at the bag hanging at his side. "Anyone who doesn't want to die," Perseus announced, "should close their eyes now." Andromeda closed her eyes. Phineus laughed. "You think we're afraid of—" Perseus pulled out Medusa's head. Phineus and his army turned to stone. Every man who had come to stop the wedding, frozen forever, gray statues in a banquet hall. Perseus put the head back in the bag. "You can open your eyes now," he said to Andromeda. They were married that night, surrounded by the stone, statues of men who had tried to stop them. It was a strange wedding. But then Perseus was a strange groom. Finally, he returned to Seriphos. He found that Polydectes had not waited. The king had tried to force Danae to marry him. She had taken refuge in a temple, and Polydectes was threatening to drag her out. Perseus walked into the palace. "I've brought your wedding gift," he said. Polydectes laughed. "You actually went after Medusa? And you're still alive? You must have—" Perseus pulled the head from the bag. Polydectes looked. Polydectes turned to stone. So did everyone in the court who had supported him. Perseus made Dictys, the fisherman who had saved him, the kind man who had raised him, the new king of Seriphos. And then he went to find his grandfather. Acrisius had heard that Perseus was coming. He fled. He ran to another kingdom, hoping to escape his fate. But you cannot escape fate. Perseus followed, still hoping to reconcile with his grandfather. He didn't want to kill anyone. He just wanted to meet the man who had tried to drown him as a baby. He arrived at a city holding athletic games. Perseus decided to compete. In the discus throw, his throw went wild. The heavy bronze disc sailed into the crowd. It struck an old man in the head. The old man died instantly. The old man was Acrisius. The prophecy was fulfilled. Perseus hadn't meant to do it. He hadn't even known his grandfather was there. But fate didn't care about intentions. The king of Argos was dead, killed by his own grandson, exactly as the oracle had foretold. Perseus became a great king. He founded the city of Mycenae. He ruled wisely. He had many children with Andromeda. When he died, Zeus placed him among the stars. The constellation Perseus still shines in the night sky. Of all Zeus's children, Perseus might have had the happiest ending. He faced monsters and overcame them. He rescued princesses and married for love. He built a kingdom and left a legacy. But even his story had shadows. His grandfather, dead by his hand. Medusa, killed for a crime she didn't commit. The violence that followed him wherever he went. Being a child of Zeus meant power. It meant destiny. It meant being part of something larger than yourself. But it didn't mean peace. It never meant peace. These were the children of Zeus. Dionysus, born from fire and madness, who gave humanity wine and ecstasy and the freedom to lose themselves, whose followers tore men apart with their bare hands. Athena, born from wisdom swallowed and skull split open, the only child Zeus kept close, the only child who was truly his. Apollo and Artemis, born on a floating rock because no land would shelter their mother. Beautiful and deadly, light and moon, civilization and wilderness. Heracles, born from deception, tormented by Hera, driven to murder his own family, who completed 12 impossible labors and still found no peace. And Perseus, born in a bronze prison, cast into the sea, destined to kill the grandfather who tried to destroy him. Zeus fathered these children, but he didn't raise them. He watched from Olympus as they struggled, as they suffered, as they became heroes or gods or both. He protected some of them. He ignored others. He let Hera torment them for crimes that were his, not theirs. That was what it meant to be a child of Zeus. You had power beyond normal mortals. You had a destiny that stretched across the world. But you also had a target on your back. You had a stepmother who hated you for existing. You had a father who was too busy, too careless, too divine to truly be a father. The Greeks told these stories because they understood something important about power. Power doesn't protect you. Power makes you a target. The children of Zeus had everything: strength, beauty, divine blood, and they suffered more than almost anyone. Because the universe balances accounts. Because greatness comes with a price. Because the higher you rise, the further you can fall. Dionysus went mad. Heracles murdered his family. Apollo and Artemis killed anyone who offended them. Even Athena, born in armor, could never quite learn to be soft. These were the children of the king of the gods, and they were broken in ways that mortals can barely understand. But they were also glorious. They killed monsters. They saved cities. They gave humanity wine and wisdom and the light of the sun. They were terrible and beautiful, cruel and kind, divine and all too human, just like their father. There are more stories to tell, more children of Zeus, more heroes, more gods walking among mortals, leaving chaos and wonder in their wake. The old stories are waiting. They've been waiting for thousands of years, and they'll be here whenever you're ready. Until next time, sleep well. And remember, if your father is a god, that might not be the blessing it seems.